I would be bringing my wife and children back to the UK at this point, and the things that they're going to miss is, well, everything.
Prince Harry didn't leave America chasing freedom. He left under pressure, paperwork, and silence. Overnight, residency vanished, alliances cooled, and a royal exile turned into a legal reckoning with consequences that follow him home. This isn't a reconciliation tour or a family olive branch. It's a calculated plea to return alone, stripped of leverage and desperate for relevance. So how did the prince, who rewrote his life abroad, end up begging the crown for re-entry? Grab a seat as we unpack what changed next. Right now, together. A return written in law. The Duke of Sussex will be returning to the United Kingdom by necessity, not by choice. This is not a reunion, nor a quiet retreat, but the end result of decisions that slowly closed every available door. Long before the announcement echoed out of London at 8 GMT on January 28, 2026, the ground had already shifted beneath Prince Harry's feet. What appeared sudden to the public was, inside government offices and boardrooms, a controlled collapse. Months earlier in the United States, a visa once treated as untouchable became fragile. The O1 visa status that allowed Harry to reinvent himself as a producer, advocate, and commercial figure depended on constant proof, clean compliance, and powerful sponsorship. By late 2025, those supports thinned. Corporate partners stepped back, contracts stalled, and the carefully built American chapter began to hollow out. Each withdrawal quietly weakened the legal foundation holding him there. The spark did not come from an arrest or courtroom drama, but from words already published. His 2023 memoir, Spare, reopened personal history with brutal honesty. To readers, it felt reflective. To immigration officials, it read as admission. Under U.S. law, even acknowledged past violations can trigger scrutiny, and extraordinary visas demand extraordinary discipline. Once reviewed, the narrative shifted from celebrity scandal to procedural risk. By January 10, 2026, the process hardened. A notice to appear landed with a deadline attached, leaving little room for symbolism or influence. Appeals moved quickly and disappeared just as fast. Political favors proved irrelevant. What remained was logistics. On January 26th, just after midnight, Harry boarded a commercial British Airways flight from Los Angeles, escorted, documented, and seated like any other passenger bound for Heathrow. The palace's response that followed was measured and unmistakably distant. There would be recognition, but no refuge. No security restoration. No diplomatic cushioning. The monarchy framed his return as an administrative reality, not reconciliation. Within minutes, headlines followed suit, trading rumor for confirmation. The image was stark, a prince reduced to paperwork, returning not as an heir in waiting, but as an unresolved liability, moving quietly back into Britain's orbit, carrying consequences that had not yet finished unfolding. Behind the scenes, officials, lawyers, and former allies continued adjusting positions, watching reactions, recalculating exposure, and preparing for the next phase. Knowing the story was no longer about exile, but about what authority would demand next, once consequences fully surfaced across institutions and systems. But when Prince Harry's return offered no protection and no forgiveness, what consequence finally made staying impossible? Stay with us. A departure engineered by consequence. The forced departure wasn't just legal, it was logistical, and it unfolded in places far removed from courtrooms or palace gates. Long before any flight crossed the Atlantic, the pressure had already settled inside a gated Montecito estate that was once described as a sanctuary. Purchased in 2020 for $14.65 million, the property rested on a $9.5 million loan that became increasingly difficult to service as income streams dried up. By January 8, 2026, court filings revealed the reality. 2 consecutive mortgage payments had been missed, triggering pre-foreclosure proceedings by First Republic Bank, now operating under J.P. Morgan. Money troubles did not exist in isolation. As contracts stalled and sponsorships vanished, liabilities stacked quickly. Among them was an estimated $3.6 million debt owed to Tyler Perry, covering unpaid private security and transport services accumulated during years of heightened protection needs. Without fresh U.S. income, without corporate backing, and with civil obligations mounting, the numbers alone narrowed Harry's choices long before immigration officials weighed in. The visa that once enabled reinvention became the weakest link. Prince Harry's O1 status, reserved for individuals with extraordinary ability, was never designed to survive financial instability or professional inactivity. Attempts to convert it into a temporary B2 tourist visa were blocked by the Department of Homeland Security, citing pending inadmissibility concerns and unresolved fiscal exposure. Canada was quietly ruled out through bilateral visa intelligence sharing. Europe declined discretion. Rumors of refuge in Botswana, Argentina, or remote islands drifted through the media but found no footing in reality. Geography offered no escape. Behind these logistical dead ends sat a document written years earlier. Released in January 2023, Spare was sold as vulnerability and truth. To readers, it was confessional. To immigration officials, it became evidentiary. Harry's admissions of past drug use, cocaine in his teens, marijuana at Kensington Palace, psychedelic mushrooms in California, were not dismissed as memoir flourish. Under U.S. immigration law, particularly IN. A. Section 212AE 2. Any foreign national who admits to violating controlled substance laws can be deemed inadmissible, even without arrest or conviction. For most applicants, such provisions remain theoretical. For an O1 visa holder, they are decisive. Extraordinary visas demand more than fame. They require sustained professional output, moral character compatibility as interpreted by authorities, and active sponsorship from a U.S.-based entity willing to assume responsibility. By late 2025, those pillars had eroded. Production ventures stalled. Representation fractured. No organization stepped forward to sponsor reapplication. The visa did not collapse dramatically. It simply became indefensible. As options disappeared abroad, Britain prepared without sentiment. The return was framed internally as management, not welcome. Operation Iron Gate, a reported counterintelligence protocol endorsed at senior royal levels, treated Harry's arrival as containment. Frogmore Cottage was removed from consideration, its lease terminated on January 15th, and security clearances fully rescinded. Heathrow offered no diplomatic suite, no fast-track corridor, no protective convoy. By the time logistics caught up with law, the outcome was no longer symbolic. Assets were frozen in motion, routes sealed, and authority shifted away from narrative control. What remained was a return shaped not by family, forgiveness, or choice, but by accumulated financial strain, statutory thresholds, and institutional distance, still unfolding, still unresolved, and quietly redefining what came next. So when Prince Harry lost sponsors, security, and leverage, all at once, what finally pulled the plug? Keep watching to find out. When platforms fell silent. In 2020, Netflix and Spotify offered enough institutional weight to turn ambition into access, smoothing doors that rarely open without power behind them. At the time, Harry and Meghan appeared insulated by contracts, headlines, and credibility borrowed from global platforms. That insulation thinned quietly. By late 2025, projects slowed, enthusiasm cooled, and what once felt permanent became conditional, then fragile. Spotify cut archetypes loose. Netflix paused nearly everything except a single remaining obligation. WME stepped back without spectacle, citing misaligned priorities, leaving silence where advocacy once stood. Without an active sponsor, the O1 visa that had carried Harry through reinvention lost its footing. His past admissions, once praised as honesty, hardened into written testimony he could not withdraw. In December 2025, Meghan's legal team tried one final maneuver, requesting a downgrade to a B2 tourist visa. It was meant to buy time, 6 months at a stretch, no work, no permanence, just presence. The answer came back cold. The DHS rejection, later leaked, listed doubts that stacked neatly. No independent income, unresolved litigation, admitted unlawful conduct, and no sustained extraordinary activity in the previous year. Even Meghan's American citizenship could not bridge the gap. She failed to meet financial sponsorship thresholds as debts piled into view. Recruitment claims from Netflix reportedly reached $12.5 million. More than $3.6 million remained owed to Tyler Perry for private security and transport. Together, the numbers told a story officials did not ignore, one of instability rather than safety. As removal proceedings accelerated, geography became a chessboard with no legal moves left. Canada declined fast-track residency. Argentina and Portugal passed quietly. A discreet inquiry to Botswana, tied to Harry's personal history there, went unanswered. Each refusal tightened the perimeter. Across the Atlantic, Britain prepared without warmth. Leaked guidance linked to Operation Irongate revealed coordination at the highest levels. Prince William and Princess Anne aligned on one principle: no special handling, no shortcuts, not even certainty. The Home Office offered process, not protection. The gates of Riven Rock did not close in drama. They opened once more, briefly, allowing Harry to leave under federal escort. The shift was subtle, but absolute. Titles carried no leverage here. Platforms no longer translated into permission. What remained was movement without agency, travel without destination, and an authority structure that no longer bent for familiarity. Behind the scenes, lawyers recalculated timelines, agencies protected exposure, and officials monitored optics as paperwork moved faster than narrative. Every decision was procedural, every delay intentional, and every courtesy withdrawn. What once relied on influence now depended on compliance. While uncertainty lingered in corridors where authority, reputation, and personal history collided daily without resolution, reassurance, or clarity for anyone watching closely, inside or outside power. So when Prince Harry lost influence on both sides of the Atlantic, which door closed last? Keep watching to find out. The day the House spoke back. The notice didn't arrive with sirens or shouting. It arrived quietly, carried by routine, authority, and timing that left no room for argument. By the afternoon of January 26, 2026, the Montecito estate that once symbolized escape and reinvention had already slipped beyond control. When a white envelope bearing a banking seal was fixed to the security kiosk, it confirmed what months of silence had been signaling. The Californian chapter was no longer collapsing. It was complete. The property, purchased in 2020 for $14.65 million, had become unsustainable long before the paperwork surfaced. Mortgage payments stopped after September 2025, a detail later confirmed in Santa Barbara County filings. Temporary relief had come from private support, most notably more than $3.6 million advanced by Tyler Perry for security and housing needs. But once media contracts stalled and sponsorships vanished, assistance turned into liability. Protection became debt, and debt became leverage for institutions that do not negotiate with sentiment. Inside Los Angeles offices, the separation between survival and symbolism was already forming. While immigration lawyers chased shrinking timelines, Meghan began restructuring quietly. By January 20th, her brand was incorporated solely under her name. Financial accounts were reorganized. Representation was adjusted without announcement. Advisors urged containment, not confrontation. The message was not spoken aloud, but it was precise. Harry understood only when movement replaced discussion. Late on January 24th, he packed alone. A single suitcase, 2 duffel bags, and no shared plan. The house no longer functioned as a refuge. J.P. Morgan had activated foreclosure. There was nothing left to delay. The final exchange was calm, almost procedural. Meghan stayed composed, watching helicopters hover above the estate. Her reasoning focused on continuity: children, schooling, citizenship, and future positioning. He would leave. She would remain. The alliance that once defined resistance to the crown dissolved without argument, not through force, but through choice. In a moment of desperation, Harry attempted to transfer partial property rights. Legal barriers blocked it immediately. The estate was already flagged under pre-seizure review. At 8:06 a.m. the next morning, federal agents arrived with a removal directive. 24 hours to vacate. No appeal window, no discretion. What followed felt deliberately ordinary: a rented SUV Los Angeles traffic. No diplomatic handling. At LAX, he queued with travelers who did not look twice until recognition set in. Shoes removed, bags scanned, cameras appeared. A whisper cut through the line. Another voice answered, sharper, final. British Airways Flight BA268 departed that evening. One way, first class but solitary. No entourage, no private suite, just a seat and a destination chosen by process, not preference. Back in Montecito, the gates stayed closed. Inside, rooms held no ceremony, only evidence of decisions already filed elsewhere. Foreclosure schedules advanced. Immigration files closed. Custodial planning shifted. Each institution acted independently, yet arrived at the same outcome. This was not spectacle. It was administration. Authority moved faster than narrative, and paperwork replaced privilege. As flights crossed borders and timelines narrowed, silence filled the space where explanation once lived, leaving consequence to speak for itself while the next demands quietly took shape beyond public view, unresolved and still unfolding. So when Prince Harry's journey ended in paperwork and silence, who was already deciding the consequence? Keep watching to find out. The Iron Gate. The palace did not rush. It waited, calculated, and trimmed away anything that sounded like mercy. Long before the public learned what was happening, the response had already been shaped behind closed doors, reduced to language that carried weight without warmth. The statement scheduled for release at 8 GMT on January 28, 2026, was never meant to soothe. Final edits were reviewed late the previous night by Princess Anne and Prince William, not as relatives, but as custodians of a system under strain. The wording was deliberate. This was not a return. It was a consequence. By then, Operation Iron Gate was no longer theoretical. It had moved from planning to execution with quiet efficiency. Frogmore Cottage was officially removed from Harry's reach. Its lease terminated on January 15th. Locks changed, access revoked. Royal security clearance vanished without announcement. Border systems were updated discreetly, shifting his classification from protected royal to civilian subject to standard scrutiny. Even biometric records, once shielded by diplomatic protocol, were reassigned. The adjustment happened silently, but it was complete. The weather matched the mood when the aircraft arrived. Rain fell in dense sheets across Heathrow, slicking the tarmac and dulling the horizon into metallic gray. At precisely 13:47 GMT on January 27th, British Airways flight BA268 from Los Angeles touched down on runway 27L. Nothing marked it as unusual. No escort, no preparation, no quiet corridors. The absence of ceremony was the message. Harry was not coming home as a prince. He was entering as a private individual, flagged internally as high profile, unmanaged, and potentially volatile. He remained seated as passengers rose and filed out, delaying the inevitable. When he finally stood, there was no aide to gather documents, no official to guide him forward. Only a carry-on and the hollow echo left behind when hierarchy dissolves. At passport control, his name triggered a yellow alert. A junior officer paused, then followed procedure, summoning a supervisor who already knew what to expect. There was no interrogation, no confrontation. A side room was cleared, paperwork completed, forms signed. The process was clinical. The moment sharpened when he filled out a customs declaration. No diplomatic exemption, no immunity, just a name written plainly. Henry Charles Albert David, date of birth, place of origin. No prefix, no protection. Beyond the sliding doors, cameras gathered quickly. Notifications had already gone live. Police established a perimeter, but the palace had issued no transport orders. There was no vehicle waiting, no extraction plan, no royal logistics team coordinating movement. For the first time in his life, Harry stood outside an arrivals terminal with luggage and no instruction. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the flashes into abstraction. Voices murmured behind barriers. Recognition rippled outward, then settled into something colder. His phone vibrated inside his jacket. Hands unsteady, he dialed Clarence House. At 13:58 GMT, a leather-bound phone buzzed on a carved desk. King Charles sat in his study, surrounded by framed lineage and the accumulated symbols of continuity. The screen displayed a familiar private line. His hand hovered above the answer icon, caught between instinct and obligation. "He's in trouble," Charles murmured aloud, though no one had asked. From the edge of the room, Prince William stepped forward. His presence altered the air. Calm, controlled, immovable. He spoke without raising his voice. Harry's situation was not an emergency, he said. It was a result. Trust had been traded for interviews, history repackaged for profit, institutional loyalty burned in public. The phone rang again. William did not flinch. "You told the Home Office we don't negotiate," he said evenly. "This is that policy." The call went unanswered. Iron Gate had been misread as punishment by those who didn't understand it. It was not emotional. It was defensive. Drafted under the joint authority of William and Anne, the operation existed to limit exposure, not to humiliate. Its measures were procedural. Standard border processing only. No diplomatic channels. No fast-track clearance. No activation of royal protection. All emergency access codes revoked. Clarence House placed under temporary security lockdown during re-entry. Communications frozen until public confirmation of presence on UK soil. The objective was containment. The effect was immediate. There was nowhere official to go. Windsor was inaccessible. Highgrove was closed. Long-standing allies were silent. Not out of cruelty, but calculation. Palace staff who once joked with the younger prince now saw only liability. Messages were unanswered. Calls rerouted. The structure had shifted. Across the Atlantic, Meghan did not return his attempts to connect. Her statement, issued through a publicist later that day, focused exclusively on brand continuity and her children's stability in the United States. There was no reference to deportation, no acknowledgement of his arrival. Silence did the work, words once did. With no alternatives, Harry hailed a black cab himself. As it merged onto the M4, England stretched ahead in endless gray bands of road and sky. A country that once bent around him now passed without recognition. Authority had moved on. Procedure had replaced privilege. The fortress held, not with guards or gates, but with rules followed to their end. Iron Gate did not slam shut. It closed quietly, precisely, and without appeal, leaving him traveling through a kingdom that no longer adjusted for his presence, while loyalty, consequence, and control settled into a final alignment, still unfolding beyond public reach. But once Iron Gate closed on Prince Harry, who would control the story next, stay with us to find out. A reckoning in print. By the morning of January 28, 2026, London had barely shaken off its winter chill, but inside Fleet Street's press rooms, the temperature was already climbing. Prince Harry's return was not treated as an arrival, but as a reckoning. Editors sharpened headlines while archived images resurfaced, ready to be repurposed. The tabloids moved fast, framing his landing at Heathrow as disgrace rather than closure, a hooded figure alone beneath flashing cameras. What followed was a careful dismantling of a public image once protected by sympathy. His memoir, Spare, was no longer discussed as a confession, but as evidence. Admissions once praised for honesty were reframed as proof of instability and entitlement. The press did not stop there. Older stories were pulled forward, stitched together to suggest inevitability. A teenage incident from 2001 involving alcohol and cannabis at Highgrove returned to print with fresh commentary. A brief stint at a London rehabilitation centre in early 2002, once softened, now read as warning. Images that had faded reappeared with sharper edges. A 2005 costume party photograph from Wiltshire circulated again, stripped of past excuses and recast as pattern. Within days, international outlets joined the chorus. European newspapers ran retrospectives charting ascent and collapse. On social platforms, short clips of past confrontations outside London clubs were looped endlessly, paired with captions mocking his challenge to the crown. Behind palace walls, the tone shifted from silence to defense. Advisors scrambled to protect the institution, not the individual. Prince William, according to sources, bristled at claims that the family had abandoned Harry. In private meetings, he reportedly insisted that every attempt had been made. His anger ran deeper than headlines. He had opposed the publication of Spare, urging restraint when early drafts circulated in 2022. When warnings failed and portrayals hardened, something fractured. The relationship between brothers shifted permanently. William no longer spoke as guardian, but as defender of structure. Under guidance from senior aides and Princess Anne, the household chose distance. No statement softened the coverage. Instead, a phrase quietly passed through press channels: "The crown does not shelter those who undermine it." The line appeared in commentary and analysis, echoed without attribution. King Charles, often seen as mediator, remained publicly silent. His decision to avoid engagement became its own story. Reporters noted the unanswered call from Heathrow, reading meaning into absence. Former staff spoke cautiously, describing a family exhausted by cycles of repair and rupture. As headlines multiplied, Harry was no longer framed as rebel or victim, but as warning. The monarchy, intent on survival, tightened its perimeter, allowing history to speak for itself while the city consumed each new angle, turning a winter morning into spectacle, consequence, and calculated distance that would shape how this moment was remembered, not with mercy, but with cold clarity, sharpened by memory, repetition, and an unforgiving press cycle still hungry for more, watching closely as silence hardened further. So when Prince Harry became a liability at home, where did Meghan Markle choose to stand? Keep watching to find out. Silence, separation, and the vanishing prince. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, Meghan Markle remained conspicuously silent. Her spokesperson released a single, careful line. The Duchess was focused on her children, her business, and her family's privacy. Yet her actions told a sharper story. Her name appeared on no legal filings tied to Harry's visa crisis or the looming foreclosure. On January 12th, her lifestyle venture, American Riviera Orchard, was formally registered under her sole control, quietly removing Harry from any legal attachment. Publicists pivoted fast, shaping a narrative of resilience and forward motion, complete with solo interviews and brand planning. Behind the scenes, distance hardened. An entertainment outlet quoted a friend as saying Meghan urged Harry to fix the situation himself. He didn't. So, she moved on. By the evening of January 28th, around 18 GMT, Harry had settled into a rented cottage on the outskirts of Oxfordshire, guarded privately, but without state protection. For the first time, there was no Crown authority, no official residence, no structured future. He unpacked lightly, one suitcase, a laptop, and a phone heavy with missed calls. What he lost went far beyond Residency. The rebel prince narrative dissolved, stripped of momentum and audience. Within days, home, status, and certainty vanished. Now he walked quiet English lanes unnoticed, suspended between exile and belonging, unreachable to family, sealed out of Frogmore, and listed by the United States as inadmissible under INA 212. Repositioning power and silence. Back in California, Meghan Markle is moving with purpose, reshaping herself not as a duchess, and no longer as someone's wife, but as a standalone American figure. Her brand, American Riviera Orchard, is advancing with careful launches, lifestyle teasers, and quiet publicity that signals independence. Since Harry's deportation, she has not spoken his name publicly. According to insiders at WME, the strategy is simple. No reflection, no regret, only forward motion. Survival, not solidarity, is now the message. This shift has fueled speculation. No legal filings suggest divorce, yet silence carries weight inside royal circles. Meghan's American citizenship, her children's schooling, and her commercial future now take priority. She appears determined to sever herself from a narrative defined by instability and legal exposure, presenting instead a version of resilience, polished for American audiences. Across the Atlantic, the balance of power inside the monarchy has hardened. Prince William has emerged as the quiet executor of institutional will. It was his refusal to endorse diplomatic appeals, his order to vacate Frogmore, and his insistence that boundaries hold. Within Whitehall and palace offices, his approach has earned respect. While King Charles wears the crown, decision-making has shifted. Security briefings, crisis responses, and public tone now funnel through Kensington Palace. It is no longer symbolic influence. It is operational. Princess Anne stands firmly beside him. According to palace aides, she urged firmness long before the fallout became public. She warned against emotional bargaining and advised security reviews after spare. Her influence is not visible, but it is decisive. Among senior courtiers, her role in shaping Operation Irongate is understood, even if never acknowledged. Her principle has remained unchanged. Duty outweighs sentiment, especially when the institution is threatened from within. King Charles occupies a quieter space. Illness, responsibility, and private grief have reshaped his presence. The unanswered call from Clarence House marked a turning point. Sources say he still checks old messages, still pauses over his son's name, but no longer initiates contact. Acceptance has replaced intervention, even when it hurts. As January 28th closed with rain beating against English windows, Harry stood alone outside his temporary cottage. No cameras waited, no voices called out. Just damp earth beneath his boots and a gray sky above. In that silence, the meaning of the crown became clear. Not family, not forgiveness. A fortress built on loyalty, one that closes without hesitation when that loyalty breaks. So what do you think drove Harry's forced return? Betrayal, law, or his own confessions? And should a crown ever shut its gates completely? We'd like to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to share them in the comments below.